Well, good afternoon to you. 306 News Talk, 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up, 3:30 from Real Clear Investigations and the Federalist, Ben Weingarten will join us as all of these confirmation hearings get underway. How closely will you be scrutinizing these Republican senators? Oh, very closely. That's the answer. Ben Weingarten discusses. Susan Crabtree is here at 4:30. Can you believe it? We're a week away from the inauguration. By this time next week, Donald Trump will be the 47th president of the United States. What will the security arrangement look like here in Washington? Susan Crabtree describes what she's hearing. That's at 4:30. At 5 o'clock, Thomas Catanacci from the Washington Free Beacon gets into the wildfires in California and the recovery efforts beyond. You can join us today. 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. Holy cow. You know, you spend all that time counting down to the election. And since the election, you've spent all that time counting down to Inauguration Day. That's the, and then, of course, after Inauguration Day, you'll spend all that time counting down towards all of the success that we're all praying that President Trump can have in his second go as president of the United States. It's really, it is an exciting time. I'm super glad he's coming back. I got into the office today, and as we were doing, as we were preparing for the show, I was turning to our producer here, Corey, and I said, do you ever think that the Trump presidency is a lot like the first Star Wars movies? Episodes 4, 5, and 6, Because episode 4, what was episode 4 called? A New Hope. That was 2016. A New Hope. We all have a bit of hope now that finally we can break the establishment. And then what happened in 2020? That was The Empire Strikes Back. They were very unhappy that President Trump had come along. The Empire Strikes Back. And then the final film in that trilogy was The Return of the Jedi. And the Jedi has returned, now a Jedi Master. Now with a very good sense of how to tackle all of the various problems in Washington. And yes, that's right, Jeff, lightsaber in hand, President Trump is coming back. And thank goodness. Thank goodness. It's a busy time. Everybody's trying to figure out, what's going to happen in these early days of the Trump administration. Everyone's preparing just to party it up all weekend long. Everyone is very excited. Which parties they want to go to, which bars they're going to go to, how they're going to hang out with their friends, how are they going to mark the occasion. And you have every right to celebrate. You should. It is a great thing. I was talking to some Republicans over the weekend, and everybody is at a place of optimism that they haven't been in a very long time. And that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. But the hard work has already been underway by, first of all, the Trump transition team. And this week now, you'll see everything kind of begin in earnest as these confirmation hearings get underway. And that all begins starting at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Can you believe that? I'll just go down the list. This is the list of some of the people who are already going to be meeting with members of Congress. The Veterans Affairs Committee meets with Doug Collins for VA Secretary beginning tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. Pete Hegseth appears before the Armed Services Committee in the Dirksen Senate building, 9:30 in the morning. Doug Burgum, slated for Interior. That's 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Wednesday, we then get Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, Marco Rubio, John Ratcliffe, Sean Duffy, Chris Wright, Russ Vought. Thursday, Eric Turner. He's the HUD pick. You get Lee Zeldin for EPA. You get Pam Bondi once again meeting on Thursday with the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And then Scott Bessent for the United States Secretary of the Treasury on Thursday. So a huge number of people. That's, I think, 13 total cabinet nominees, according to Punchbowl this week, up for confirmation hearings. And you will get your first taste of just how vile the attacks are going to be against all of these guys. The efforts to take them out. Today I saw, it's pretty funny, the Washington Post has an entire piece up today on all of the nominees and who they consider to be acceptable and who they consider to be not acceptable. And I have to say, if you knew that a list like this was coming out, or you saw a list like this where the Washington Post is picking who's acceptable and who's not acceptable, and you're one of the nominees, You're sitting there praying. You're like, please let the Washington Post consider me not acceptable. Like, the last thing you want to be is one of the guys who they're like, this guy's great. WAPO loves him. No, I don't want that at all. The Washington Post editorial board. You ready? There's a lot of green thumbs up on this graphic from the Washington Post, which is making me nervous. Marco Rubio, Scott Bessent, Pam Bondi, Doug Burgum, Brooke Rollins, Howard Lutnick, Lori Chavez DeReamer, Scott Turner, Sean Duffy, Chris Wright, Linda McMahon, Doug Collins, Kristi Noem. They're all getting green thumbs up right now from the Washington Post. Lee Zeldin, John Ratcliffe, Jamieson Greer, Elise Stefanik, Stephen Moran, and Kelly Loeffler. All green thumbs up. Now, I'm not going to pretend like any of the people I just read to you are not people that would be good in the roles that President Trump has assigned them to. I don't know all of them, but certainly among the ones that I'm aware of, I like them. I'm perfectly fine with a green thumbs up from the Vince Coglianese show. But from the Washington Post? Now, of course, what you're waiting for is, who don't they like? Who are the red thumbs downs for? Well, I'm glad you asked. You ready? Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense. Thumbs down. You ready? This is the Washington Post editorial board, defense experts, obviously, describing why they've given him the thumbs down. The former Fox News anchor lacks the temperament and moral fiber required to lead the Pentagon. This is the Washington Post editorial board, of all places. He persuaded Trump to pardon accused war criminals and has a well-documented history of womanizing and heavy drinking, though he says he'll give up the bottle if he gets one of the most sensitive and powerful jobs in the world. You hear that? So they're angry at him. They're angry at him just for being Pete Hegseth. They're angry that he's been dealt a better hand in life than the entire Washington Post editorial board. They're jealous. Is that what I'm saying? I think that's what I'm saying. They're jealous of Pete Hegseth, so they give him a thumbs down. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. also gets a thumbs down from the Washington Post, which has, of course, made a lot of money from the pharmaceutical industry. Health and Human Services pick RFK Jr., quote, with bird flu on the rise, now is not the time to put an anti-vax, that's a lie, he's not anti-vax, conspiracy theorist in charge of public health. No, it'd be better to put somebody in place who walked lockstep with all of the government claims about COVID. That would be much better, wouldn't it? Something like the Washington Post editorial page. They'd be perfect to run HHS. You know, if you just went along with every stupid mask requirement, hang up plexiglass in your place of business, stand 1,000 feet apart. Double mask. Don't see your children. Don't visit your grandparents as they're dying. The last thing they need is for you to be near them. Human touch is the one thing they don't need right now. That's the Washington Post editorial page who say that RFK would be unacceptable as the head of HHS, considering he was on the right side of all of those issues, the Washington Post on the wrong side. Who else? Russ Vought. Thumbs down from the Washington Post. They do not want Russell Vought to head the Office of Management and Budget. And they engage in the lowest IQ criticism that the left can possibly summon. They say he was a part of Project 2025. Oh, Project 2025. That scary binder full of ideas on how to make the government better? What are you even talking about? It's what think tanks churn out all the time. The cool thing about Project 2025 is that anybody paid attention to it at all. Normally, think tanks are churning out white papers and recommendations, and nobody pays attention. People collecting absurd salaries, tax benefited donations to a think tank that nobody's really actually producing anything of value. Here's Russ Vought and the way the Washington Post editorial board assesses him. The Project 2025 contributor plans to violate federal law by ignoring the Impoundment Control Act and not spend money appropriated by Congress. Wow. How scary. So Russ Vaught's dark, evil plan is to save people money. They're literally using this as a criticism of him, that he'd like to try to find ways to not waste your money. To not waste your money. You know, Russ Vought, he did an interview with Tucker Carlson not too long ago where he described his dark and scary philosophy that it is absurd that the federal government require every dollar be spent. If the executive branch can achieve a mission, on time and under budget, well, then that money should be used for something else or should be, of course, not taken from the taxpayer at all. It turns out we're taxing people too much. We don't actually need this much revenue. We can save money. We can do this more efficiently. Well, that would actually be the kind of person that'd be like a fiduciary responsibility, right? Where you actually are responsible to the people whose money you're taking. And the Washington Post does not want the government to think like this. They're angry that Russ Vought would dare, quote, ignore the Impoundment Control Act and not spend money appropriated by Congress. What a lawbreaker. What a dastardly plan. To save you money, that's evil, according to the Washington Post. When he had the same job during Trump's first term, he played a key role in holding up funding to Ukraine and then defied a congressional subpoena about it. He played a key role in holding up funding to Ukraine. Now, I believe what they're trying to refer to is Trump's first impeachment, the nonsense impeachment of President Trump. And this is so Russ Vought, what was that story about again? The first impeachment? It was trying to figure out whether or not Joe Biden was corruptly taking money from foreign countries. Whatever ended up happening with that story? Oh, that's right. The Biden family was taking money corruptly from foreign countries. In fact, so corruptly that Joe just gave Hunter an 11-year pardon to cover all of it. And the Washington Post editorial board decided that the lesson from that story is to give a thumbs down to Russ Vought, who was on the right side of that issue. So the guy wants to save us money. He wants to prevent corruption with our money. And why isn't that 2 green thumbs up? That's every thumb up. And then finally, the Washington Post editorial board for you today. I'm sure they'll have other people. They may even flip some thumbs over at some point. Like the emperor, as they call for the death of the competitors in the Colosseum. Like in Gladiator. That's what I'm referencing. They may turn on some of these guys who they support right now, but the other person who gets a thumbs down immediately, and to be clear, if you get a thumbs down from the Washington Post editorial board, that is a huge thumbs up from the American people. It's Director of National Intelligence nominee Tulsi Gabbard. They're giving a thumbs down to Tulsi Gabbard. They're saying she should not be trusted. The former Congresswoman from Hawaii is overly friendly with U.S. enemies and cannot be trusted to be an honest broker when the president makes major national security decisions. First of all, what? She's friendly with U.S. enemies? How about be a little bit more explicit about this claim? She's friendly with U.S. enemies. Are you saying she has spoken to adversaries of the United States? Are you questioning her loyalty to the United States? She, as far as I can tell, I don't know how many members of the Washington Post editorial board are veterans. She is a veteran who has served with honor, who has served overseas. She's deployed on behalf of this country. And you're attacking her as somehow disloyal to it because she had a conversation with Bashar al-Assad? Is that what you're saying? And what did the American people think of U.S. officials talking to foreign adversaries in Trump's first term? Well, they liked it. They liked it so much they've elected him again. President Trump had conversations with Vladimir Putin. President Trump had conversations with Xi Jinping. President Trump had conversations with Kim Jong-un. He met with them in order to bring the temperature down around the entire planet. In fact, Tulsi Gabbard has been on the receiving end of some of the most vile behavior out of the very intelligence community she's being asked to be one of the leaders of. She was followed on airplanes by U.S. air marshals and she was treated as if she was somehow a threat to the country. It's absurd. Hillary Clinton has slandered her as some sort of Russian propagandist or something, or Vladimir Putin stooge. The most despicable people that you and I are aware of have named her their enemy. which once again takes that thumbs down and puts it right into a thumbs up for me. Tulsi Gabbard is the right person for this role. She knows what it's like to have the excesses of the intel community come down on an American citizen because she's lived it. And she knows that our priority should be to bring the temperature down, to better inform America, to better protect America, and not to use the weapons of the intel community against American citizens. And for that reason, that's 2 thumbs up for Tulsi Gabbard. Yeah, so the Washington Post hates all of these picks, these nominees that President Trump has brought forward, especially as they relate to the intel community and national security and the Secretary of Defense, which is interesting because that's where all of the conspiracy theories that the Washington Post has been a part of. That's the same topic, actually. All the deep state nonsense. Yeah, the Washington Post has been carrying water for them for years. No wonder they're against the people who would be brought in to address all of this. President Biden today spoke about national security as if this was like some big success on his part at the United States State Department. And here's another lie that he told today.
Compared to 4 years ago, America is stronger. Our alliances are stronger. Our adversaries and competitors are weaker. We have not gone to war to make these things happen. During my presidency, I've increased America's power at every dimension. We've increased our diplomatic power.
Oh, my gosh. What a bunch of garbage. Of course, there's a lot more war going on all around the planet, and whether or not U.S. troops are actively involved in them, there's certainly a lot of U.S. treasure headed there, a lot of bloodshed in the meantime. These things have not improved under Biden. Things have gotten substantially worse, and President Trump is not shy to admit that, as he says he's got to clean it all up when he gets in. Now less than a week away. Nice to say that. But again, it does feel like a lifetime from now. When Joe Biden is somehow still in office, still struggling to put sentences together and pretending like it's been a big success. Yeah, tell that to the fewer American workers who have jobs now. We have a lot to get to today. Ben Weingarten from Real Clear Investigations and the Federalist will join us next. We get into some of these big nomination fights and the eyes that you and I will have on those Republican senators. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up today, we have Susan Crabtree joining us. We'll talk to her about the inauguration next week, the security precautions necessary, and whether they're enough. She'll give us what her reporting is telling her now. And then Thomas Catanacci from the Free Beacon is here at 5 o'clock. We'll reflect on the chaos still going on in California and how those people, those Americans, are going to be able to pick up the pieces in the aftermath of these awful fires. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. All of those confirmation hearings set to begin in earnest this week. It's been weeks now of President Trump's nominees stopping by the Senate, talking with senators, trying to allay whatever concerns they might have. But now we'll have those open confirmation hearings beginning tomorrow with Doug Collins to head the VA, and the big one, Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. Chuck Schumer, speaking on the Senate floor just a few moments ago, was saying that he wants to defeat him, that he wants to get him defeated. He thinks that Pete Hegseth's nomination is very, very troubling, very, very troubling. Although we've heard other reports already that the FBI background check has gone through and it came through clean as a whistle, and that Pete Hegseth, he's in a great position to become the Secretary of Defense. But it's not going to be without a fight. And we'll see what happens this week. But before we get there, Ben Weingarten joins us now. He's editor-at-large for Real Clear Investigations and a senior contributor to the Federalist. Ben, good to have you with us.
Vince, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. How contentious do you think this will be this week, these nominees?
I'd expect the only thing that could at all temper Democrats' hostility here being the fact that they suffered a decisive defeat at the ballot box in November. But that said, I think to the point of Chuck Schumer saying prior to his recent remarks, he wants to really put the heat on all of these nominees. Republicans have to understand that this is probably going to be, this set of confirmation fights will be the first set of major battles in a political war where we may not see the resistance out there and as overt as they were last time, but the Democrats are going to do everything in their power possible to destabilize, delegitimize, undermine, and subvert this administration. And so that's why my point in this op-ed that I wrote for the Federalist today is that you shouldn't think of each of the individual confirmation fights like a battle on the merits for each individual position. This is actually part and parcel of a much broader war, and Republicans need to show that they understand the stakes of that war, which is that the entire agenda is predicated on having the personnel to execute the policy. You can't show weakness. If you let one scalp be claimed, it will start a feeding frenzy, and it will lead to ultimately a chain reaction that undermines the first 100 days and ultimately undermines the rest of the agenda. So Republicans need to be able to hit the ground running
Yes.
to execute the mandate Americans elected them on, and it starts with passing these confirmations, these nominees quickly.
Well, that's exactly right. And they should hold, regardless of what your ideology as a Republican is, if you're squishy or otherwise, you should hold these Democrats to the same standard that they held you to, which is when Lloyd Austin was put forward, all but 7 Republicans in the Senate voted to confirm him. So that's the way Republicans played in the past. And what's going to happen this week is we're not going to see Democrats play the same way. They're going to vote en masse against President Trump's nominees. And every one of these Republicans, including people like Joni Ernst, they would do well to pay attention to how Democrats return the favor.
You're absolutely right. The least that you should demand of your party is that they fight just as hard and just as tough as their opponents, or almost definitionally, your party is going to lose every time. So I think, to your point, the charge to the incoming now Senate Majority Leader should be, you have to fight just as hard as Chuck Schumer would fight. Be the same thing in the House to the Speaker.
Yeah.
Speaker Johnson should fight just as hard, just as tough, just as smart as former Speaker Pelosi would fight. It's a necessity. It's an imperative if you're not going to be an extinct party ultimately. And to your point, it looks shameful in retrospect, the Republican support given to some of these disasters of nominees. Democrats ought to give the same deference to Republicans, but we shouldn't expect them to do so. And that's why there has to be unity on the Republican side, and a recognition that even if there might be some ideological differences or other differences with some of these nominees, President Trump needs to be given deference. And it's about something much broader, which is the agenda itself.
Yeah.
And if that agenda succeeds, it's going to redound to the benefit of all Republicans and the American people writ large.
And if Republicans are unified, then we don't have to worry about all the intra-party fighting and the headlines that are associated with that. And instead, we can concentrate our fire on browbeating the Democrats into submission, which is, why are you obstructionists? Why are you doing this? Why are you betraying your country? Why are you basically telling the voter that you don't care at all about their preference? That's where we should be training our fire.
That's exactly right. The pressure should be on the Democrats. Why are you being obstructionist? Why would you be standing in the way of a peaceful transfer of power? The American people, including a substantial number of Democrats, wanted this agenda. It's clear how this agenda will benefit Americans broadly. And certainly, obviously, from a political perspective, Democrat seats that are up for the Senate in 2 years, obviously the purple districts in the House, the feet needs to be put on the fire of all of these people. Why would you stand in the way of this agenda?
So let me, but in these early days, though, as we begin this process, you are firing appropriately a warning shot in the direction of these Republican senators who might get it in their mind that they want to defeat one or several of these Trump nominees. And an early test of this was when people like Joni Ernst and Lindsey Graham started raising objections to Pete Hegseth in public. They suggested that they might not be able to support him. And the backlash to that was pretty immense among conservatives, and who all spoke out, and almost in unison, that this is definitional. This will define your career if this is the mountain you choose to die on, Joni Ernst. And all of a sudden we saw them change their tune over the course of 24 hours, Ben Weingarten. Do you think that was instructive, that experience?
I absolutely think it was. And look, for years you've had squishy Republicans who will campaign like they're going to be rock-ribbed conservatives, and they get into office and they fail the grassroots every single time. And it seems like, it's sort of the sabotage Republicans, there they go again. Here you had real political heat being brought to the fore, and I think a real fear that, well, actually, we could get primaried, or this could cost us our seat down the road. And I think it was on both the politics of needing to stand with these nominees because if one falls, it starts a feeding frenzy that imperils the whole agenda.
Yes.
And then also on the merits with someone like Pete Hegseth, where the American people are not looking for business as usual. People who come from these institutions or who want to be friendly with these institutions when the institutions have failed us for a generation plus. It's absolutely about having a Defense Department that is, again, a War Department that exists to destroy things, kill our enemies, and therefore deter them going forward, and prioritizes excellence, skill, and strength over all of the woke criteria that have been put there and that have imperiled, frankly, the life and limb of Americans. So on the politics and the merits, I think it was instructive, and I think it sets the tone strongly for what's to come in the days ahead.
Also, they mock him for being a Fox News host. They act as if that's his entire career, and then they use it as a pejorative. Meanwhile, these establishment figures had no kind of negative criticism of Lloyd Austin from coming right from Raytheon right into the Pentagon. It's like, so it really is the inversion of what's important here. And, you know, when it comes to these senators, you talk about kind of what the risks are to them. One of the early risks to me, I think, especially I look at a guy like Lindsey Graham, is that he loses access to Trump. That's really what Lindsey wants. Like, he clearly wants to have Trump's ear, to keep working with him, to have access to the president. And so that leads me to believe that the more President Trump exerts himself and his own influence over these senators, the better things are going to go for Trump's nominees. Do you think President Trump should involve himself here?
I think he's going to be very careful and delicate about where and when he uses his power. I think it's an instructive example when you look back to the quote-unquote continuing resolution, the stopgap spending so-called bill, where you had this chorus of voices online. You had Doge obviously engaged, and then there was sort of a cascading effect. And then when the statement came out from Trump and Vance against the bill, it killed it almost immediately. But Trump was not apt to immediately intervene. You saw the same thing in the speaker fight as well. It wasn't really until on the floor with the last couple votes where you had Trump intervene. So he's going to use his power, I think, delicately and diplomatically. But I think, to your point, he's the most powerful figure in the world. For many of the senators, they want to have proximity to power so they can have influence over policy. And to that end, he's going to wield that power very strongly, but I think very carefully and practically going forward. And he has obviously lots of folks out there who also sort of speak to some extent on his behalf, but he calls the final shot at the end of the day. So I think, to your point, it's one, getting primaried, two, access to Trump. Those are major, major levers for these senators.
So another example of what you're talking about, sort of the diplomatic version of Trump, but that these senators would do well to remember, is that he sat out the Senate leadership race. He didn't make a pick when it was time to replace McConnell between Thune, Cornyn, and Scott. Scott was the favorite among conservatives, the guy who was most likely to execute the vision that we conservatives have for the country. And that's not the guy who won. John Thune won. President Trump let the Senate handle its business on its own. In other words, he did a favor to John Thune. And in return, Thune should deliver these nominees, don't you think?
Yep, and same goes, obviously, for the Speaker of the House as well. I think that Trump has a healthy respect for the institutions. When he thinks the institutions are going to work at cross purposes to the agenda, he may well intervene. But to your point, there's leverage that's been given by giving those institutions distance to deliberate for themselves. So I think we have to remember always we're dealing with a political genius here. I mean, for all of the detractors, this is the person who is the smartest political figure maybe in world history based upon what we've seen and what all the experts would have recommended that he do, et cetera. And he's very tactful and smart in these negotiations, when he uses the carrot versus the stick, when he intervenes versus when he steps back. And I think you're seeing that with his deliberations and negotiations with the legislative branch right now.
I don't know if you saw today. I'm actually, at this point, I'm certain you have. But the Washington Post ran an editorial today where they endorsed all of the nominees they think are fine, and they put thumbs down on all of the nominees that they think are terrible, that shouldn't get the job. They called them, quote, unacceptable. Among them, Pete Hegseth, RFK Jr., Russ Vought, and Tulsi Gabbard. Now, I was saying earlier, I kind of feel like I want to have the thumbs down from the Washington Post editorial board. I don't want the endorsement of the Washington Post. What do you make of this, Ben Weingarten?
Right. These are the greatest endorsements you could possibly get. And it's precisely because the people that the Washington Post, which is really a mouthpiece effectively for the uniparty and obviously the left, the people that they loathe are the ones that have the greatest possible chance of shaking up the administrative state and, for some, the deep state. Yeah. That is what official Washington, the blob, the permanent bureaucracy loathes. And so those are your greatest potential change agents, and those are the people that really deserve the backing of the Senate, because at the end of the day, that is what the American people voted for with Trump 1 and with Trump 2, where there's really a chance to crystallize it. Someone who will shake up the status quo, challenge these institutions that have worked against Americans and our interests. And so we should be very optimistic and bullish on the prospects of those that the Washington Post loathes.
Yes, because they're outside the control of the establishment, and that's why they hate them. I hope they succeed, and we will be scrutinizing, especially these Republican senators, as the nomination process moves forward. Ben Weingarten over at Real Clear Investigations and at the Federalist today with a great column. GOP senators can prove they know what time it is by confirming Trump's nominees stat. Ben, great to talk to you, sir.
Vince, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Always. There he is, Ben Weingarten. And it's such a pivotal moment. Isn't that amazing, though, that all but 7 of the Republicans voted to confirm Lloyd Austin, the guy who wears 8 masks? You know? Lloyd Austin. How has that worked out? Remember when he resigned over Afghanistan, the withdrawal from Afghanistan? Oh, wait, that never happened. He's had a disastrous tenure as Secretary of Defense. And I haven't looked back, but my guess is the Washington Post editorial board gave a full-throated endorsement to Lloyd Austin. But they're against Pete Hegseth. They don't like him. He lacks the temperament and moral fiber, they screech. Right, 3:50 now. Yeah, I was mentioning Chuck Schumer just took to the Senate floor to attack President Trump's nominees just moments ago. Take a listen to him here. Here we go.
If there's any cabinet position that ought to have a steady and drama-free individual, it is certainly Secretary of Defense.
All right, pause for laughter. Okay.
Unfortunately, Mr. Hegseth's background is deeply troubling, to put it generously. We all have read reports about his radical views, his alleged excessive drinking, the allegations about sexual...
Okay, everything he's saying right now that he's about to, the list he's going to reel off, just imagine to yourself, what if we really knew the true lives of U.S. senators? I don't really want to know, but please, again, spare us.
About his radical views, his alleged excessive drinking, the allegations about sexual assault.
They have millions of dollars of secret settlements in the United States Senate between lawmakers and staff.
And his failures in the financial stewardship of multiple organizations.
Those organizations loved him. Those organizations loved him.
Serious allegations
on the record
such an
statements.
Important job. So why would the Armed Services Committee wish to rush through these hearings, particularly when the documents are
I don't know, national security, getting somebody in charge of the Pentagon quickly who can help lead the most important military on planet Earth?
Available to all the members of the committee, including the FBI background check. Mr. Hegseth will have an opportunity to answer questions about these allegations and about his record.
Remember, he's been meeting with senators for weeks. There are no questions left. They've already asked all of them. They're just going to do it in a public forum now to try and embarrass him.
As well as his views. He can expect his hearing to be tough but respectful.
Yeah, sure.
Candid.
Respectful.
But fair.
Liz Warren is out there claiming that he's an extremist because his tattoos are Christian.
The stakes during tomorrow's hearings will be very high, not just for the nominee, but for the entire country. It's not hard to imagine an emergency situation where the Secretary of Defense has to make quick and steady decisions about our military. Is someone with Pete Hegseth's alleged history really the kind of person we want at the helm?
Yes.
In a very, very important situation?
He's precisely the person.
Dangerous situation?
Yes.
Like that?
Yes. Who would you rather have in a foxhole with you, Chuck Schumer or Pete Hegseth? Make him Secretary of Defense. And shut up already, Chuck.